Primarily, understanding how to adjust your time, how to set time, and how to work with it is very important. A good example here is setting up some time rules and being able to navigate and add them and work with them, and basically saying, okay, well, one of the things I want to do is I want to set the time format, maybe add some extra ones. Like here, I added a new column that basically allowed me to see the absolute date. Why is that relevant to the capture? What does that really help me do? If I come through and mark a packet, what does that mean for when I go in and I now adjust the time display format and select one of these options? What is that going to look like? So we'll get into that in a module, but that is extremely important for the exam. All right, so interpreting basic trace file statistics. This is an area in the exam which delves into a great part of this tool, which some of you may or may not use very often, but it's this statistics menu, and it's very important for the exam. And you can make the call on how relevant this will be for working on the job and working with clients and customers. But these tools are very, very important to know for the exam, specifically what each one of them shows you. For example, the statistics menu. If you scroll down, you can see some very relevant data here. You can export this data and add it to what we would consider to be a network analysis report. So if you're working for a customer and you wanted to get them information based on the network, a lot of the information can come out of the statistics menu. It does a lot of different things here. It could show you specific conversations. It will tell you here for IP4 the actual conversations to and from or in both directions, and the duration and how much data is being sent. So these are very important. This is also a quick view to say, hey, on my network right now, I have some pretty specific things going on. I have my home network that I'm using. I have some websites that I'm accessing. This is also helpful for security. A quick view into what it is that you're doing on the network, or what was being done when you captured the data. So again, and that's what that section of the exam is talking about, is these very specific things. We'll talk about this too, the service response time. Flow graphs are very important, understanding specifically what's going on here in the TCP handshake. What am I looking at here? Do I see a pattern of SYNAC and then a reset? What does that mean? For the exam, you need to know. But again, these are the tools that you may be presented with, or the screenshots you may be presented with, to be able to answer those questions, and or if on the job, figure out what the problem is. Okay, section 9, create and apply display filters. Essentially here, we talked about this earlier with the capture filter and the display filter itself and how different they are. You're going to have to understand those differences for the exam. We will get into that through the modules, but again, just knowing right off the bat that they are different, that they have some similarities, but essentially are extremely different, is very important to the exam, and again to your job. Just very quickly, why would you even use a capture filter? The brief answer, or one of the answers, would be that when I run a capture on a network, I know what I'm looking for. It might just be UDP traffic, and I don't need to capture any ARP or any other data. And I just want to look for that type of data, and by doing that, I've just removed at least 3/4 of my capture file, the size of my capture file, and I've streamlined it. Now, once I have the capture saved and I want to further refine it down to IP address, I can now use a display filter to do that. But prior to the stopping or saving of the capture display filter will allow me to do that, and or once the capture is done, the display filter will allow me to refine it further. Okay, section 10, file streams and reassemble data. Again, this was covered heavily in the foundations exam, but something to be aware of is that when you follow a stream, and I'll do this again very just so that you see it. If you right click a conversation or something that you want to look deeper in, I'll give you an example here. You think you have a proxy issue and you want to see if the data is cached or not. You could follow the HTTP data by following the TCP stream and taking a look at some specific data that will tell you, okay, this is HTTP communication, 200 code, basically what was being done here, all this information, what was the link that was being pulled. Here you can see we were actually looking at this. This was the wiresharktraining.com site. A lot of information here to give you the details needed. And here for the actual proxy, is it caching? Was it a no store or a no cache? So these are the types of things that are very important to understand when looking through here. So for example, and the question may be in this capture example was, did you find that there was a problem with it, being cached or not? So being able to look at this and knowing that this is the area where you need to focus on is what this section of the exam is covering. Okay, next, customizing Wireshark profiles. I kind of touched on this when we talked about preferences, but again, just really understanding the preferences to profiles relationship and knowing how to navigate, how to make them and how to navigate within them and use them is basically what this customizing the profile section covers. Okay, annotating, saving, exporting, and printing packets, heavily covered in the Foundations course, but as a basic or a quick refresher here, I had marked the packet before. I can go in and I can annotate, I can make packet comments. This is a test packet, and knowing that if I'm using a capture file that, this is long here, hold on a second, I ran out of room. If you do not use the new pcapng file format saving, that the annotations will not remain, is something to remember here. You can make an actual capture comment, and this is a good place for a report. This is a home network capture, saved date, time, looking for dropped packets. Essentially, and I'm making this very quick here just as a review, but you can make this whatever you want, but once you save this and it's saved in the capture, essentially what you're doing here is you're allowing yourself to save that actual note within there as well. And where does the note actually show up? It can show up inside the actual frame itself. Just give me a second here. I resized this so you can see, but I want to make sure that I open this. Here, let's do it one more time. I'm going to annotate, test, annotate. And then when I actually look at this here, it will add in here the actual data that I'm annotating for future reference, so that it's always in here. Okay, so essentially knowing how to annotate, save, and export, print packets. Basically, the biggest thing here is to knowing how to save the data in the different formats in which you can save it. What's interesting here is, and this catches people sometimes. I'm going to have to open up a new capture here to do this, so stand by. But when you actually start the capture itself, and go into capture options, there's options here to be able to chop up and slice your data. Again, here I mentioned before, annotations will only be saved if it's the new PCAP-NG format. You can choose not to use that if you're using an older system. But here, if you're going to save a file, you can say right here, I want to save on the C drive in my test captures folder. I want to save and start chopping up the data because I know I'm going to run the capture for 2 hours and I'm going to have one file that's like way too big to open. So I'm going to say I'm going to use multiple files and I'm going to capture them specifically after, you know, a certain size or time, or I'm going to set the ring buffer and it's just going to keep overwriting, or I'm going to stop the capture over after X amount of packets at a certain size. So just remember that with saving and annotating and, you know, exporting, merging, printing, and working with the files, there's a lot of different things to remember here, and all very relevant for the exam. Okay, the Wireshark expert system covered heavily in foundations, but just so that you're aware, because we will cover it in here, but more at an advanced level as we're troubleshooting to look at certain things like zero window conditions and why that happens, and key things that will help you with the exam is some key stuff here. Let me just kick off this capture really quick here. Some key things here is when you're looking at this, what does the expert really mean? Well, it's very important to understand the expert, but not completely rely on it, because it's just going to give you some clues as to what's going on in here, but it may not necessarily tell you exactly what you're looking for. So it's very helpful. It's important to understand the differences between the tabs and key things, that, you know, how to get to certain things and how it navigates with the window here and how it selects and moves around the packets lanes pane list. But essentially, this is a snapshot of what you know, Wireshark thinks a problem may be, or something that it wants to tell you about. So for this one example, this is a suspected retransmission. We'll cover this towards the end of this course in the last few modules. But what is a retransmission? Why does it happen? So it's fine that it told me that it was a retransmission, but is it okay